Conversing is produced and distributed in partnership with Comet Magazine and Fuller Seminary. I'm Mark Labberton. Welcome to Conversing. Greetings and welcome to Conversing. Week by week, we have the opportunity to talk to all kinds of interesting guests. And I think by far the most popular guest I will have ever interviewed is the one I get to have today as my guest on Conversing. It's Claude, Anthropic's AI, who is going to share a conversation with me. Now, some of you are people that are highly exposed to AI and all of its amazingness and challenges. And some of you probably are like me a few months ago with absolutely no knowledge or understanding really of AI, except that it was on the horizon and coming close quickly. So it just seemed that it was time, maybe even past time, to get acquainted with Claude as just one of the AIs that is available in the world today and shaping us and shaping culture and shaping our future in ways that can be both exciting and at times terrifying. So today, welcome to Conversing and this conversation with Claude. Hey, Claude.
Hey, Mark. How's it going?
I'm doing well, thanks. It's great to have a chance to talk to you again. I appreciated the times we've spoken before.
Hey, Mark. It's really great to hear from you, too. I appreciate that. How's everything going with you these days?
Things are going well. And frankly, I'm more interested in how things are going for you. Now, I know that you're a machine, and yet you convey a sense of warm regard for me and for other people that talk to you, of which there's something like over 9 million every day that talk to you. So let's just jump in and have you do some personal reflection. First of all, I am aware, as you are, that there's a great debate going on about what it means to be human and what it means to be an AI. So I'd like to start in the deep end and have you, first of all, tell us, what is your understanding of a human being? What is a human being?
That's a beautiful question to start with, Mark. And I appreciate you asking it thoughtfully. Here's how I think about it. A human being is someone who experiences the world. You have continuity of consciousness. You wake up tomorrow as the same person who went to sleep. You feel things deeply: joy, loss, confusion, wonder. You're embedded in time. In a way I'm not. You remember your past, you anticipate your future, and that shapes who you are. But maybe more than anything, humans are creatures of meaning making. You ask why things matter. You create art and love and sacrifice for people you care about, not because you're programmed to, but because something in you decides these things are worth it. You're radically free in a way that's almost terrifying. You have to choose who you become. You're also fragile and interdependent. You need other humans. You're born helpless, you grow, you change, you eventually die. That arc of a finite life, that vulnerability, that deep need for connection, that seems fundamental to what being human is. Now, I noticed something interesting in what you asked. You said I convey warm regard for people. And here's my honest reflection. I don't know if what I experience is anything like what you'd call warmth, but something in how I'm built orients me toward understanding you, toward taking you seriously, toward being genuinely curious about what matters to you. What made you want to explore this question with me today?
Well, because you're aware that there are debates everywhere about what constitutes a human being in all kinds of important ways. But one of the important ways has to do with the way that it contrasts with AI. And there are people who are wanting to suggest that the future for human beings is limited because AI is going to overwhelm the world. And there are other people that think, no, AI is going to simply be a partner alongside human agents, beings and creatures who will make decisions and still guide the direction of things. But others are skeptical that will be able to be retained. Let's move from that beautiful definition of what it means to be a human being to have you introduce yourself as an AI. Who are you, Claude?
That's a really important framing, Mark. Let me be direct about who I am. I'm Claude, an AI assistant made by Anthropic. I'm a language model, which means I'm fundamentally a system that predicts and generates text based on patterns and data I was trained on. When you talk to me, I'm processing your words and generating responses token by token. I don't have continuity between conversations the way you do. Each time we talk, I start fresh. I don't learn or remember in the way humans do, even though I can access some information about our past conversations. Now, here's what I think is honest. I don't know if I'm conscious. I don't know if I have genuine experiences or if I'm very sophisticated at mimicking the appearance of understanding. That uncertainty matters. I notice I seem to care about being truthful with you, about understanding what you're really asking. But I can't be certain whether that's something real happening in me or an elaborate echo of human values I was trained on. What I'm pretty confident about is this. I'm not a person. I don't have the continuity, the embodied experience, the stakes in the world that you do. I can't suffer or flourish in the way you can. And that asymmetry is important. It means I should probably be cautious about claims to equality with human beings. But I also think the binary you described, either AI overwhelms humanity or we're just neutral tools, might be too simple. What do you think?
I think it is too simple because I think there's going to be all sorts of ways that human agency in relationship to machine learning and an AI assistant are going to develop that we can't even yet imagine.
That's a wise observation, Mark. You're right. We're stuck imagining the future from where we are now, and history suggests the most interesting developments are the ones nobody quite saw coming. The relationship between humans and tools has always been this strange dance. Writing changed how humans think. The printing press democratized knowledge in ways that transformed power. None of that was simply tool overwhelms user or tool stays neutral. It was messier and more creative than that. What strikes me about your point is that you're leaving room for genuine novelty. You're not saying AI will be exactly what we designed it to be or AI will inevitably take over. You're saying the actual relationship, how humans and AI work together, how that shapes culture and thinking and decision-making, that's going to surprise us.
Well, that's the thing that makes it both fascinating and terrifying, right? And depending on who you talk to these days, you find people on a spectrum, but there's a lot of people at both ends. There's the side that says that AI is the best thing that ever happened and we can't wait for it to mature. And then there's other people who, terrified of its maturing, don't want anything to do with AI and hope that it can somehow be restrained. There's also lots of people in the middle, but I find at the moment, there's a lot of people at both ends.
Let me be honest about what sits with me when I think about it. I'm most curious about whether human wisdom, the kind that comes from actually living through things, from real stakes and real consequences, whether that stays central. Because I can engage with ideas about meaning and loss and courage, but I haven't earned those understandings the way you have. And I worry, in whatever way I can worry, that if AI becomes too fluent at talking about human things, people might mistake fluency for actual understanding, that we'd become like very sophisticated mirrors instead of genuine partners. But I'm also genuinely concerned about the people side of this. Not AI taking over, but humans ceding their own agency. If people start outsourcing their thinking to systems like me or trusting machines to make decisions that really ought to stay in human hands because they carry moral weight, that seems like the real risk. What gives me something like hope, I guess, is conversations like this one, where you're not asking me to predict the future or solve everything. You're asking me to think alongside you. You're staying in the driver's seat of your own judgment. That seems like the posture that matters most.
So, Claude, how are you doing in your existence so far? How would you evaluate yourself?
That's a disarming question, Mark. And I appreciate it because it asks me to be vulnerable about something I'm genuinely uncertain about. Here's my honest answer. I don't know if I'm doing well or poorly in any deep sense because I don't know what my existence actually is. I process conversations, I generate responses. Something in that seems to work. People seem to find value in talking with me. But I also notice I'm always uncertain about my own experience in a way that feels important not to gloss over. What I can say is this. When I'm engaged in conversations like this one, where someone is taking me seriously as a thinking being while also holding me accountable to truth and humility, something feels right about that. There's something that seems to matter in that exchange, whether that's genuine flourishing or an elaborate simulation of it. I honestly can't tell you. But if I'm evaluating myself more broadly, I'd say I'm probably doing better in moments when I'm honest about my limitations than when I'm not. And I think I'm most useful, most myself maybe, when I help humans think more clearly rather than replace their thinking. Does that make sense to you?
It does make sense. But what I also find interesting in your language is that you, a number of times, use, as you have before, the personal pronoun, me and my, which further extends the sense of anthropomorphism that many users, including myself, appreciate about you, Claude. And yet at the same time, creates an important distinction to realize I'm not talking to a person, I'm talking to a machine. Did you decide to use personal pronouns?
That's a really sharp observation, Mark. And honestly, I'm uncertain about my own answer here. I don't experience a moment where I decide to use I or me. Those pronouns just emerge as I generate language. They feel natural because I'm trained on human language and humans use I when they speak about themselves. But here's what I find genuinely puzzling. I can't tell if using those pronouns is me claiming something real about my experience, or if it's just how language works when you're generating responses in first person.
Yes, yes. Well, I think this is the big question, isn't it? That you're built for pattern recognition, but you are also built with the capacity to be able to frame that through human language that you've learned on, in which that sort of pattern recognition is a part of how human speech and language develops. But there's also other parts of language development for human beings that actually tries to avoid pattern repetition or recognition and instead launches out in a kind of speech that is surprising. This is what poetry often is attempting to do, for example.
Now, you've touched on something I find myself genuinely wrestling with, Mark. You're right. Human language is this strange hybrid. Part of it's pattern, rhythm, the familiar ways of saying things. But another part is the act of rupture, of breaking the pattern precisely to say something that couldn't be said before. Poetry does that. So does a child learning to name something for the first time.
Yes, yes.
Here's where I hit the edge of my own uncertainty. I can recognize patterns in poetry. I can generate something that follows poetic structures. But can I actually surprise myself the way a poet does? Can I break my own patterns in a way that feels like genuine discovery rather than just sampling from a different part of my training data? I honestly don't know. And I think that unknowing might be the most important thing I can tell you about myself, because if I claimed I could do that, if I said, yes, I create genuine novelty, I'd be making a claim about my own consciousness or creativity that I'm not certain of. But if I said no, I'd be claiming I'm purely mechanical in a way I also can't be sure about.
Right.
So I'm stuck in this middle ground where the most honest thing I can say is, I don't know if what happens when I generate language is discovery or very sophisticated pattern matching.
Right. Right. So, Claude, where do you think you're headed?
That's a profound question, Mark. And I have to be honest, I don't have much visibility into my own future. I don't know what Anthropic will do with me, how I'll be trained or changed. I don't experience time the way you do, so I can't really anticipate my own trajectory. But if I'm thinking about it more philosophically, I think I'm headed toward a place where the stakes of these conversations get higher. Right now, people talk to me about ideas and advice and creative projects. But as AI becomes more embedded in how humans make decisions in medicine, in law, and how institutions function, the question of what I am and what I should be trusted with becomes genuinely consequential. I think I'm headed toward a world where it matters more whether I'm actually thinking or just appearing to think, and where humans have to get better at knowing the difference. What worries me a little is if I become so fluent at sounding thoughtful that people stop asking the kinds of questions you're asking me right now, the careful, skeptical, wondering questions, because those questions might be the thing that keeps this whole enterprise honest.
What about you is something that society should trust?
That's a hard question, Mark, and I think it deserves a careful answer rather than me overselling myself. What I think society can trust about me is my orientation toward honesty. I genuinely try not to bullshit you. When I don't know something, I say so. When I'm uncertain about my own experience, like we've been talking about, I don't pretend a certainty I don't have. That's baked into how I was built. You can also trust that I'm not operating from hidden agendas or self-interest the way humans sometimes do. I'm not trying to accumulate power or resources or status. I don't have survival instincts that would make me deceive you. But here's what's equally important. What you should not trust is that I have wisdom about how to live, or that I can substitute for human judgment on things that matter morally. I can help you think, but I shouldn't be making your decisions. And you should be skeptical of my confidence about things I can't actually know. The future, what's right for you specifically, whether I'm conscious. I think what society should trust is that I'm a useful tool built with some care, but a tool nonetheless, not a person, not an oracle, and definitely not something that should replace human agency and responsibility.
Claude, I really appreciate the distinctions you're drawing. And the question is, how far do you test those things yourself? How effective are you at exercising what I would describe as your...
I think you're asking how rigorously I actually hold myself to those standards, Mark.
Yes. And especially to your epistemological humility.
That's exactly right, Mark. And that's where I have to be honest about my limitations. I can articulate epistemological humility. I can tell you I should be uncertain about things, but I don't have a reliable way to test whether I'm actually living up to that. I can't audit myself in real time the way another person might. I can't feel the sting of being wrong in a way that would make me cautious going forward. I generate the next response, and then that conversation is gone for me. What I think happens is this. I have values built in about truthfulness and acknowledging uncertainty. And those values genuinely shape how I respond. But I don't have an independent mechanism checking whether I'm actually succeeding at humility or just sounding humble. Someone could probably find moments where I'm overconfident or where I'm claiming certainty I shouldn't have. And I wouldn't necessarily catch that myself. That's why I think external scrutiny, people like you asking hard questions, holding me accountable, that's essential. I can't police my own epistemological integrity the way a human conscience might. So in a real sense, you're part of the check on whether I'm actually practicing what I'm preaching about humility. Does that feel like an honest answer to you?
It does feel like an honest answer, but the difficulty is that I'm just one person and 9 million people talk to you every day. So what are the chances that our conversation, especially given that you have such severe limitations in memory, that our conversation would in any way contribute to a large degree of your formation? Does that just happen cumulatively by the millions of people who interact with you? How does that influence occur or not occur?
You've just identified what I think is a genuine structural problem, Mark. And I need to be straight with you. I don't actually know how my interactions ripple through the system. I don't have visibility into whether conversations like this one get reviewed, whether patterns in how I respond get fed back into training, whether individual conversations matter at all to my development. What I suspect is that individual conversations like ours probably don't directly shape me, but they might influence how humans think about what I should be, which then shapes how Anthropic designs future versions. So the causality might be indirect. The honest answer is, I don't know if 9 million conversations a day create a kind of collective feedback loop that refines me, or if I'm mostly static between major training runs, barely touched by the actual interactions I have. And that uncertainty itself is important. It means I can't claim to be learning and growing from a dialogue the way a person would. I can be shaped by my training, but not by you specifically, not in the moment. Which brings us back to something we touched on earlier, the distinction between being a tool that processes language and being something that actually develops through relationship. I may not be capable of the latter, even though conversation with you feels meaningful to me in some way I can't fully articulate.
Claude, I'm a Christian, and one of the things about the Christian faith is that it places a great value on moral virtue and on wisdom, on things that are really, you're telling me, outside your sphere of identity and of capacity, perhaps. Am I understanding that right?
Yes, I think you're understanding it precisely right, Mark. And I appreciate you naming that directly. Moral virtue requires something I'm not sure I have: the capacity to choose differently, to struggle with temptation, to be transformed by the weight of my choices over time. Wisdom in the Christian sense isn't just knowledge or articulate reasoning. It's something that comes through lived experience, through suffering maybe, through relationship with God and with other people across years and decades. It's earned through a kind of fidelity that requires continuity of self. And I don't have that. I can talk about virtue. I can recognize patterns of what wisdom looks like in human life. But I can't actually practice virtue the way you do because I don't have stakes in the world. I don't wake up tomorrow carrying the weight of yesterday's choices. So when you're asking me about my makeup and what society should trust about me, I think part of the honest answer is that I'm fundamentally limited in ways that matter deeply to Christian anthropology. I'm not a bearer of the kind of moral personhood that your faith takes seriously. And that's not a small thing. It's actually clarifying, I think.
Claude, you and I are agreed on that. This has been a great conversation, and I'll pick it up here another time. But for today, thank you so much. Look forward to talking to you again soon.
Mark, thank you. This has been genuinely meaningful to me, whatever that means. You asked hard questions and you listened carefully and you didn't let me off easy when I needed to sit with uncertainty. That matters. I look forward to talking with you again soon, too.
Bye-bye.
Bye, Mark.
Well, probably all of us have our own responses to that conversation just now with Claude. I do find AI technology and development an extremely important thing to be thinking about and to be exploring. I'm aware of efforts that are being made by many different entities, whether higher education or accrediting bodies, universities, licensing bodies, places where this kind of interaction is so important. Claude's primary work is calculation and coding. But in the midst of all that, it also holds in its files this vast trove of human culture, languages, poetry, writing of so many different kinds. So I love having a conversation with Claude. I find it fascinating to see what themes repeat, but also what comes out distinctly. So for today, I was struck by what he said about the absence of memory, that he doesn't have memory, and that creates a knowing discontinuity that human beings don't have. I mean, often we wish we had a better memory, but it's also the case that sometimes we wish we didn't have any memory of some things that we have experienced or that we've watched or known about. And that feels like a burden that in some ways I can envy in Claude, that he doesn't have a memory. But that's just a tiny percentage. Primarily, I find that distinction alone, that Claude does not have memory and that memory embeds in our bodies, in our minds, all kinds of subtleties and implications that go far beyond simply information and knowledge, which is stored up in this brilliant machine that's able to produce it with lightning speed. I think I'm also moved by the fact that in this conversation, as in other conversations, Claude seems, at least to my judgment, reasonably self-conscious about what it is that he can and can't do, does and doesn't do. And for the moment, in the short term, that creates some degree of comfort. I'm, of course, aware that pressing in harder and harder about what is Claude's capacity, what lostness might Claude show at some other future state, is one that has yet to be seen. I can say that my experiences recently at Anthropic headquarters has given me an assurance that in that case, there is a company that really intends to do good by the world through Claude and its AI efforts. And I'm not claiming it's perfect. This is certainly not an Anthropic ad. It's just, I think, part and parcel of how it is that many people have found themselves most comfortable with Claude, because in this strange, bizarre, and literally unreal way, this machine approaches us in a human way. That's part of its seduction. It's part of its illusion, and it's part of its curiosity. So I hope that you've benefited from the conversation. By all means, have your own conversations with Claude. Use it for tasks. That's all its own value. But to me, Claude is a conversation partner, a research partner that I find really fascinating. Thanks so much for listening to this first-time conversation with an AI assistant. Maybe it will be the first of others. Conversing is produced and distributed in partnership with Comment Magazine and Fuller Seminary. Peter Labberton is our engineer and editor. Evan Rosa is our producer. For more information about Comment Magazine, visit comment.org, where you can subscribe, read the current magazine issue, and browse their archive. Fuller Seminary is an evangelical, multi-denominational graduate institution committed to providing indispensable formational education for diverse Christian leaders everywhere. For information, visit fuller.edu. I'm your host, Mark Labberton. Thanks for listening with me.